Let's use a lot of layer technology to enhance this landscape image, or I guess you'd more correctly call it a seascape image. I'm going to open it by double clicking. I'm in the bridge now, and since it is a raw image, it does open in Camera Raw. And what I'm going to do is, let's see, it is late afternoon. I'm going to make it a little bit warmer temperature, like that. Just brighten it up just a little bit. And now the exposure looks fine. Let's maybe open the fill just a little bit to get a little bit of detail in some of the darker areas here. But at the same time, I want to increase my blacks to give it a little more contrast. And let's bring the contrast up here a little bit more, like that. Going to increase our clarity a little bit, and I'll bring my vibrance up a little bit to really accent some of these colors. All right, now we're going to open this as a smart object in Photoshop. So it comes in, takes a moment to open. There we are. Now let's just take this and bring it around a little bit so that I can see the whole image here. Okay. Now I'm going to make it just a touch smaller. There we go. All right, so here's our real starting point. What do I want to do to this? Well, let's see. One of the things is I'd like to give it even a little bit more brightness and contrast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the brightness and contrast adjustment layer here. I'm using Photoshop CS5. We'll bring up the brightness just a little bit here and bring up our contrast just a little bit. There we go. Okay, now what I'd like to do, I like the way this cliff is looking, but these other areas back in here are just too bright. They're too washed out. So how can I bring that down? Well, one of the things I can do is I can put a curves layer, curves adjustment layer on here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Just click on curves and let's bring this down a little bit. There we go. Well, that's helping. Oops. That's helping a bit, but there's a couple of little things. I'd like to get my water a little bit darker in here, and this is a little bit too dark in the cliff. So let's attack the cliff here for a minute. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my layer mask on the curves adjustment layer, and I'm going to paint in there in black. And what that'll do is remove the curve from having any effect in there. So this is what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select my brush tool here, make sure I'm at 100% opacity, and let's even make the brush just a little bit bigger. And now I'm just going to go in and paint in here and just lighten this back up just a little bit, and maybe lighten this little area in the foreground a little. Okay, that's good. Now I want to go in and actually I'd like to darken this other area in here a little bit more, but I'm going to do that a little bit differently. I'm going to make a dodge burn layer to do that. And the way I do that is I hold down my Alt or Option key and click on the new layer button down there. Let's just name this DB for dodge burn. And I'm going to take it out of normal mode and I'm going to bring it down and put it into soft light mode and fill it with the soft light neutral, which is gray. Now what this will do is this will make a layer that if I paint on this layer with black, it won't paint black, it will darken those areas. And if I paint with white, it'll lighten those areas. So now I'm going to selectively go in here. I've already got black selected, and I'm going to darken some of the areas that I want darker. Well, I'm going to take my opacity here and I'm going to move this back to about 25% or so. Well, I've got 23%. And now I'll just paint on the cliffs back here, and you can see that these are getting a little bit darker. And that's what I want to do. I want to bring this up and bring a little more detail into there. Now let's see what we can do about some of the water out here. Let's just bring that in, and you can see that by doing this I'm also bringing a little more detail into the area, as well as making some of these areas a little bit darker. There we go. Now getting a little more definition in the waves also. So there we go. That looks pretty good. Let's even go very, very lightly over in here. Okay. All right. So there's my image, and it looks pretty good. But this is just a background image. I'm really going to kick this up just a little bit. I'm going to put some birds in here. So what I'm going to do, first of all, is let's take these 4 layers and let's just put these into a group. And the way I'm going to do that is I just highlighted the 4 layers. I clicked on one, then I shift-clicked it, or clicked on another, and I'm just going to drag these down and put them into a group. Okay, there we are. We open the group, we see all of our layers, and now they're not there. Okay, now, so how am I going to put these birds in? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the bridge, and I'm going to select this big pelican here, and I'm going to go over to the File menu, and I'm going to place it in Photoshop. Now when I place it in Photoshop, it comes in as a smart object, just like this. And now I'm going to make it bigger by holding down my Shift key and my Option or Alt key, and I'm going to grab the corner of one of these, of this square, and I'm going to just pull this out. By holding down the Shift and the Option or Alt key, what's happening is that this is not only retaining its aspect ratio, but it's enlarging from the center. So now I can take this and I can move it around a little bit like that, and now I'm just going to hit my Enter key to accept it. Well, let's see. Is there something I'd like to do to that? Well, one thing I'd like to do to it is let's change the angle just a little bit, just to make the pelican's belly parallel to the waves here. And the way I do that is I go into my Edit menu, and I go to Free Transform, or Command or Control T would have done it, and then I'll just grab this and move this around just a little bit like that. There we go. And we'll just bring that like that. And we click Enter. Now, since this is a smart object, and since I would like to do a little bit of work on the pelican itself, let's go in and just double click on the pelican icon here. And what that's going to do is that's going to give me a dialog and then open up another picture of the pelican. Well, what I want to do is I want to lighten up just a little bit of it here, and I'm going to do that using another dodge burn layer. And the way I'm going to do that now is I'm just going to put a dodge burn layer, same as I did before. I hold down my Alt or Option key, click on the new layer, we'll call it dodge burn, and I'm going to make it soft light and fill with the soft light neutral. And well, gee, that really doesn't work too well, does it? Because there's no background on here, and I would actually have to go in and cut a mask. Well, let's cut a mask. I'm going to hold down my Command or Control key and click on the pelican itself, and you can see it gives me a selection. And then I'll come up here. Well, the dodge burn layer is already selected, and now I'll just click on the mask icon, and there's my layer mask. Okay, so now I have a layer mask on this pelican, and if I hide the pelican itself, you see there's my gray. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint on the gray, not on the layer mask, with white this time, because I want to lighten up this area in here. But this brush is way too big, so let's make that brush a lot smaller here. And now I'm going to go in, and I'm still running at about 20%, 23, 25%. So we'll just lighten this up just a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit. Just so you can see a little more detail in there. Actually, I lightened this up too much, so I'm going to switch to black by hitting my X key, and then I'm just going to darken that down just a little bit. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this, and then once it saves, I'm going to close it, and you can see that this is going to update. Well, it's already updated. I'm a little bit brighter up in there. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I want to duplicate this pelican and put it somewhere else. The way I'm going to do that is all I really need to do is drag that layer down to the new layer icon, and I have a copy. And now I hit my Command or Control T to get into free transform, and I'm going to hold down my Shift and Option keys and grab that corner and make this one a lot smaller. And let's just take it and move it back over into here somewhere. And just to make it so that it doesn't look exactly the same as this one, let's flip it over. Well, first I'm going to hit Enter and accept it. And now I'm just going to go to Edit, and I'm going to go to Transform, and I'm going to flip horizontal. And now the pelican's flying in the other direction. Okay, I want to put one more pelican in. And the way I'm going to do that, since I'm using CS5, let's use one of the CS5 techniques here. I'm going to go to the mini bridge. Of course, if you're not using CS5, you just go to the bridge and you place the pelican in. But in CS5, all I have to do is grab this blurred pelican and just drag it in, and it automatically comes in as a smart object. So now we'll close this. I'm going to go in, hold my Shift and Option keys down, and I'm going to make this pelican a lot smaller. And then I'm just going to take it and I'm going to drag it down here and maybe twist it a little bit like that so that it looks like it's coming in for a landing. Maybe back up in there like that. Let's make this even a little bit smaller. There we go. I'm going to hit Enter here, and now my big pelican, I don't know, maybe I should make that a little bit bigger. So let's take that, and since it's a smart object, I can hit my Command or whoops, wrong one. Let's escape out of that. Go to the big pelican down here. And now I'm going to hit my Command or Control T, and let's just make this pelican just a little bit bigger. Oops. There we go, like that. And now what I had done is I had somehow moved my center. So we're going to take this over like this and move that like that and select it. Well, let's see. We need to take our big pelican copy and put that behind the big pelican. So let's take the big pelican copy here, and we're going to use our move tool to, we can move it somewhere off into the distance back there like that. Okay, now everything doesn't look really right. I mean, things are where I want to put them, but it doesn't look right. And one of the reasons it doesn't look right is because everything's too sharp. So what I need to do for my background here with the group is I need to turn this group into a smart object, and then I need to add a blur onto this. So let's take this, and the reason I'm making it a smart object is so that if I don't like the blur, I can always change it. So I'm going to click on the group. I'm going to hold my right mouse key down or hit Control key or Control and a mouse, and I'm going to convert this to a group, and then I'm going to add a Gaussian blur filter. And let's make it a little bit more blurred here. There we go. This way we're more blurred, so it looks like it was shot with a longer telephoto lens. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to make that blur gradual. In other words, I don't want this area to be quite as blurred as the area back there. And the way that I do that is I put a gradient mask on my smart filter. So I'm going to go down to here, I'm going to highlight my smart filter, I'm going to highlight the gradient, and I'm going to make a gradient that's going to go from black to white. And I notice here I've got my gradient reversed, so that let's go from here down to here and let's see what happens. Yeah, that looks like that's doing it, because what's happening now is the background is still very blurred, but this has gotten a little bit sharper down in here. Now, what I also need to do is I need to take care of this corner of the land right here. So I'd make sure that my smart filter mask is highlighted here, and I go with my brush tool, and I'm going to paint with black right into here, and that's let's bring that up to 100% opacity. So now that area in the foreground is nice and sharp. Okay. My big pelican copy, which is the one way back here, is way too sharp. So what we need to do is we need to go to that pelican. Let's make sure we got the right one. That's the one. And I'm going to add a blur, and I'm going to put the Gaussian blur on that. And yeah, I guess that's okay. Make him blurred because he's way in the background. And then I'll take my little pelican here, make sure I got the right one, and I'm going to put a little bit less of a blur on that one, but we're going to put a blur on it anyway. So let's go up and we go to Gaussian blur, and rather than 3.2 radius, let's just bring it down like that. There we go. Okay. And that one's a little blurred anyway. I mean, it's called a blurred pelican, and it's blurred because it's moving a lot faster than the others. So there we are. There's our image, and we've got a very nice image there.